Again, this community conversation series is sponsored by the NAACP Pasadena branch, Indalon, uh, POP, which is Pasadenians Organizing for Progress, the Community Clergy Coalition, as well as CCOP. And for those of you who don't know, my name is James Farr. Again, a big welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening. I want to first introduce and thank Elizabeth Barrios. Am I saying that right, Elizabeth? I got it. Okay. Elizabeth Barrios. She's going to be in the chat room. And when we get to that portion of question and answers from our community and those who are listening in, Elizabeth will be navigating us through that process. As I said, if you have a question, raise your hand, put it into the chat. We want to make sure that we, are able to answer as many of those questions or comments as possible. As I said earlier, this conversation is centered around Villa Park and the community around Villa Park and stakeholders, residents. And so we'll jump into the conversation. But first, I want to introduce our two panelists, and I'll have them give a little bit more background on themselves. I'll first start out with Jose Madera. And Jose is joining us today. Say hello, Jose. All right. And then one of my favorite people, Julieta Argon. Did I say it right, Julieta?
Yes, you did. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
So again, thank you. Certainly you two are grounded in community. Julieta, you've been in Pasadena most of your life. Jose, you're from Pasadena. So I want to start out with Jose. Just give us a little background on who you are, kind of how you come into the conversation, and I'll throw that same question over to Julieta.
Well, thank you. First, I would like to start off by acknowledging the Tongva people. Right? Tongva people are the original current stewards of this land that we know, Pasadena. So my respects to their elders, their past, present elders, as they live strong for their people and their ancestors. My name is Jose Madera. I'm born and raised here in Northwest Pasadena, live in Northwest Pasadena. I went to PUSD schools, and I currently work at Adelante Youth Alliance, which is a community organization here in Pasadena, where we work with families around the Madison community. All over Pasadena, but a lot of our work is done with the Madison community. I'm part of a collective called Collective of the Roses, a new collective that started this past year. I've been doing a lot of solidarity work with a lot of organizations here in Pasadena, which includes Indalon and NAACP, Black Lives Matter Pasadena, again, to bring justice to our community here at the Northwest.
Okay, thank you, Jose. And Julieta, a little bit of background on yourself.
I immigrated from Mexico when I was 9 years old. I've been living in Pasadena for 40 years. And I'm also a product of PUSD. I actually went to Madison. Right now, currently, I am working at the job center that is run by Endilon. And we actually have the contract with the city to do the minimum wage. I am also part of a board of POP. And I am also part of a group called PEPEC that you will be hearing from this group pretty soon. And I'm just, being part of the community, and I'm just very glad that I can be a voice to the community. Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you for sharing. So a lot is happening, in and around the community and the area. A lot of changes are happening. So, today we want to talk about politics and the intersection of community. We also want to talk a little bit about policing within the community, the increase of violence that we've seen in the community and shootings, touch on some gentrification. And then, like I said, we definitely want to hear some solutions. Pasadena is a very storied city. It has a lot of things that hide in plain sight. And sometimes some of the issues that are a little bit north of the 210 freeway kind of are swept under the rug, or they're either over amplified. And so I wanted to, ground it and give voice to those who are actually there to, kind of unpack the things that they're seeing. We have a new mayor in Pasadena, and our new mayor is Victor Gordo, who is also formerly the council member who represented D5. And so I kind of want to just, for many, it was a point of celebration. Mayor Gordo is the first Latino elected mayor in the city's history. And I'll start with you, Julieta. Is Mayor Gordo becoming the new mayor, is that a win for Latinos or Latinx in Pasadena in the community?
Knowing a little bit of Victor from many years, I noticed that Victor has started getting involved in politics at a very young age. I feel that even though he might feel part of the community, we perhaps he got a little bit disconnected because he was so involved with politics. So it's going to be a plus in the sense that it's going to be a beautiful struggle to bring the community to him, and we're not going to have a language barrier. We're going to be able to talk to him directly. He's going to be able to listen to
Okay.
us. We're willing to work together with him.
Okay. Jose, the same question to you. Is it a win for the Latino, Latinx community?
I think, like many of us believe, representation is a good thing, but it's not everything, and doesn't mean that there is going to be justice or the resources that we need within our community. I think in the city itself, especially in D5, there's been a big disconnect with the city, with city council. If I've been talking to many folks in the community and I ask them, who's your council person or who's the mayor? A lot of them don't know. They say, I don't know, right? Again, showing that there's a disconnect. So whether whoever might be in the council, our community doesn't know.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. Tomorrow night, and probably about this time, our city council will have appointed a new city council member to replace Mayor Gordo, and the new district council member would either be Patrick Amsbury, Jessica Riviez, Martha Schickenberg, as well as Michael Warner. So one of those four by tomorrow, this time perhaps, certainly come Friday, will be the new D5 council member. If any of those four are listening to you today, Jose and Julieta, what's your message to them? And this is where I really want to start getting to some of the issues, like what are they inheriting? What are they walking into? Because you've already said, both you and Julieta said that there is some disconnection with the previous representation. What is this new person going to inherit?
I'm hoping that they are aware of the situation that we are living, that this specifically more this population. I'm hoping they're aware of what they're walking into, because right now the community is really struggling. We have the Hispanics, we have the number one number of deaths because of COVID. We have so many jobs that are being lost. We have so many people that have lost their homes, and they're moving in together with other people to be able to survive. We have so many issues that are going on. I mean, there's so many. And so I'm hoping that they can understand this, that right now this community is really hurting, and that with the power that they're going to be holding, they're going to be able to really focus on what's the best thing for the community.
What do you say to that, Jose?
I believe the same thing. And I think it has to do a lot, like I mentioned before, where people don't know it because there's no level of trust. A lot of the community don't trust the city, especially around the Villa Park community. It's known as the immigrant community, right? A lot of undocumented families live around there. Madison Elementary is undocumented immigrant school. So a lot of people, given that they just don't trust, they won't come talk, they won't communicate. Even when there's community events, they just don't trust to be out there. They feel that they're not protected by the city, and that their children are not protected by the city.
When we look at like community needs, because I heard Julieta said, there are a lot of struggles, and there's this disconnection. What are some of the community needs as you see it? Kind of speaking from that millennial space.
Is that a question for Jose?
That's for Jose.
Yes.
Can you say the question again? Sorry.
What are the needs of the community? Like we heard that there's a gap or communication separation, and people don't know representation. But now I kind of want to look at like what are the needs within the community? Is it within the parks, or what are you seeing, or what are people telling you in the community?
Well, one, like Julieta mentioned too before, there's a language barrier. Like people don't know what's going on. Like for instance, right now there's a lot of people who don't know that the 99-cent store is going to be there's plans to demolish it and create a apartment. Right, the 99-cent store is where a lot of the community goes to, a lot of the working class community go to, but a lot of people don't know because there is no outreach on, hey, let's get the community input. What does the community think about it? And there's been so many projects like that around, especially in Northwest Pasadena, where the community is not engaged or involved. One, because of the language barrier, there's no effort to bridge that gap. And then people don't have the time because, like it was mentioned, people are losing their jobs. People are worrying about being kicked out of their house because they can't pay the rent. Right now with schools, parents are concentrated in how their children are going to get education because there's a technology gap there. So they're worrying about all these things to survive and to live in Pasadena, where they can't go to community meetings or talk to the council.
Yeah, I hear you saying that. Communication is like a theme in this first segment of what we're discussing. Do you feel like the city is making an earnest effort to, make sure that they're reaching out or putting out culturally relevant communication pieces that would inform the city, or are they kind of missing some steps there?
To me, yes, I don't believe it's enough. It's never enough. And going to one organization or going to one part of the community and checking off a list of like, okay, that's how we're communicating with this community. Like, no, that's not. You have to engage the community and find different ways and talk to the community members within that community. And I think there's a chance lost when you don't engage, especially the community leaders in it. I don't think, just again, this checkoff list where, oh, we're talking to this one community leader and that's it. Like, no, that's not enough. They don't represent everybody.
Mhm.
Okay.
I would like to add to what Jose is saying about how right now the community is living day by day. Right now, they're not really thinking about what's the best thing for my community. How can I get more involved into the community? Because they have so many things to worry about. Right now, they're worrying about how they're going to put the food in their plate tomorrow, how they're going to put the food in their table tomorrow, how they're going to pay the rent by the end of this month. And so it's more of a survival kind of thing that is going on, where instead of thinking, well, what can I do to get more involved with the community? What can I do to make my community better? So this is actually part of the problem where, like Jose is saying, that gap that we cannot close. So this is where we need to perhaps not bring the community to the council people, but bring out the council people to the community. I haven't seen a council knocking on doors and talking to people. I just haven't seen that. And so I think that it's just so important for people to at least get have the feeling that they're getting noticed by the government of the city, and they're not just seen as just employees that are going to work and just providing a job and just providing a service, and that's it.
Okay. Well, and I want to ask Jose about this, and this is understandable. My condolences to the loss of your family member, but you lost a family member in one of the recent shootings around Villa Park. Mayor Gordo at the time, Chief Perez, and City Manager Steve Permel all did a kind of press conference, if you will, from Villa Park. Does that count as the contact, or are you saying that you need to see more? And then I wanted to also check in with you about how your family is dealing with the loss of your uncle.
Thank you, and thank you to the community. We've gotten a lot of support from the community, for my family, for Aaron's family, and also for Ernesto's family, the gentleman that was also died a few weeks before, my uncle. So again, thank you to the community. No, I think that they have to do more. Just one video, and especially again, we're talking about how how the community sees and what information they get. A lot of the community, again, there's a technology gap. The community a lot of the community didn't see. A lot of my family didn't see the video, right? So there's that gap. So that's not enough. We need people, we need the council, we need city folks to come into the community and have those dialogues and talk to people. Hey, this is what we're doing. This is what's going on. And this is what we need to do together to move on. That's what, and talking a lot to my family, that's what they want. There hasn't been much communication with city folks, with Mayor Gordo or any of the council about what they can do.
So let me ask you, when your uncle was murdered, did the city, anybody reach out to you? I mean, what was that experience like? And then also, what was the family's experience with, dealing with law enforcement?
That I know they didn't reach out to me, and that I know of, they didn't reach out to the family members who took control of this whole situation. And that's something that really enraged them, that they didn't reach out to them. And at a point where they told me that they didn't want to talk to them, right? And again, that it shows the disconnect, the no trust, that's a revolving circle within the community. Even when something like this happens, again, there's no avenues, there's no process, and how you support the families that are going through this.
Okay. Policing in and around Victory Park, I mean, as you said, it's kind of known as an immigrant community, or the immigrant park, if you will. What is the sentiment from folks on the ground of how they're experiencing our police department, Julieta? And then I'll come back to Jose.
I feel that there was a big change. I've lived all my life about 2-3 blocks away from Villa Park. And I remember there was some rough times, and then we were able to see some really good times. I remember I used to see police officers getting out of their cars, talking to people. I don't see that anymore. And now when I say this, I'm not saying that we need more policing, and this is where maybe not many people are going to agree with me. I feel that it's easier to prevent a problem than to fix a problem. And so part of the preventing is how we have to direct our attention and direct our energy to providing programs for the youth, providing places where the youth can go and hang around. Like, for instance, I know of some programs because I am so involved in the community. My son is actually in PALS, which is a police department program. But when I talk to the mothers of here of the area, some of them have never heard of PALS. Some of them have never heard of other programs because they're not out there so that people can know about them. And so just like after school programs for kids, we don't hear much about youth programs. The community doesn't hear. I'm going to change the subject a little bit. We have our own health department, and yet we don't know anything about what's going on with the health department, because as we have been saying, that we have that open gap between the community and the city, where the city is not really sending the word out there. And we have so many nonprofits that could actually do that job. And yet we don't see that because the city might not support the nonprofits as much. So with police, a lot of people might think that we need more police. I feel that we need more programs than police.
Okay. And I'll throw this to Jose. Have you given any thought to maybe an idea of specifically like programs you'd like to see? Like if we're kind of in this reimagining phase right now with COVID and pandemic, things open, close, and we kind of can step back and do things differently in the future. What does it look like, Jose, if there were the programming or the solutions that you guys are hearing the needs from the community?
Yeah, so first I want to speak on, I've been talking to many folks around the community. I go to the park and just talk to the people there. And when I asked them, what do you think is needed for us to feel safe? What solutions there needs to be? And their quick answer is always, we need more cops and we need more cameras, right? That's the first thing that they say. But as I keep dialoguing with them or having conversations with them, I later asked, like, well, what's the relationship between the cops and the community? And story by story, they tell me there's no trust in the cops. They harass people over here, and mostly black and brown. They are aggressive. And they, story by story, they tell me, I've had an instance where they come to my house, they basically tore down the door, and they try to get someone in there, and then later on they find out it was a wrong address, or someone's kicking in at their front porch, and the police just comes, doesn't ask any questions, and then they just misidentified somebody. So story by story, you see, and what that tells me, and what that speaks on, is that our community, we need to change, and like you said, reimagine a way we see community safety, where our first reaction when there's a conflict in our community is to call the police, right? Any kind of conflict, right? We need to change that by these programs. And last week, where we heard about a great program, Cahoots, that instead of calling the police, there's this crisis intervention that can come and help the community, right? But because that's the only solution, that's the only thing that's presented to our community, that by calling the police will solve these issues, that's the only thing that we know. But once you engage the community, you'll see that, again, there is not a trust in the police. There's a fear in the community by the police. So saying we need more cops, it just brings, again, fear to the community.
Right. Because when you, understandably, they're going to do enforcement, they're going to get calls for service, they're going to show up sometimes, because of a call for service or whatever other reason. But am I hearing you correct in saying that after they've made that contact, be it right, wrong, or whatever the reason is that they're there, that there's no restoration? If in the example you gave, like, hey, maybe it was the wrong place or wrong, there's not the decency to say, hey, I'm sorry. It's just kind of move on. And
that's basically what they told me. They just say, I'm sorry, and then they move on. So now there's this fear, and then especially if there's youth in that house or around the neighborhood that see that, that's very it's traumatic. It's a traumatic experience to see that. And again, they say, oh yeah, they just say, sorry, let's move on. That's it.
So do you think maybe that's why more people don't come forward to kind of share information with police, because of the mistrust?
Yeah, mistrust, and also retaliation. Again, there's in code in the street, right? No one wants to be a snitch, but also people are scared. There's no trust in it. There's no trust.
Okay. Julieta, how's gentrification impacting the area? I know Jose brought up just on Los Robles and Villa, where the 99-cent store is going, that there's a development that's coming in. Are you guys feeling like guests in your own community, in your own neighborhood yet?
I'm sorry. I feel that this complex that Jose mentioned, the one on Lake, the one in Villa and Los Robles, it's going to be such a huge step toward gentrification. We already see some of that. And the funny thing is that even though I have been living in my house for 30 plus years, they still look at me like I'm the outsider. And so when we're talking about gentrification, if we're going to have this huge 220 apartment, 1 block away from where I live, I can almost see that it's not going to be my people that is going to move into that complex. It's most likely because it's such an open slot where they open it to such a wide variety. We have outsiders moving into Pasadena, and it's outsiders that really don't understand the culture. But James, if you allow me, let me go back a little bit to add more of what Jose was saying about the police.
Please do.
Thank you. Because one of the things that our people sometimes are not going to report any crimes or any wage theft or any violence in their home, nothing. It's because of them being afraid that when they go show up at court, sometimes there's going to be an immigration officer waiting for them outside the court. And so that's a very huge risk to take. So instead of risking going to a court or testifying something, they'd rather stay quiet. It's safer. So they have put so much, they have invested so much in moving into this country to just let it go over something, reporting a crime or doing something about it, because they're going to be afraid of going back, of getting deported back to the countries where they came from. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we'll get ready to kind of move more into, I see there are a lot of questions that have come into the chat zone. I think there are probably about 75 at this point, and we'll be able to kind of still pull back and go back into some of the topics that we discussed. But I want to, at this point, bring in Elizabeth to kind of navigate us through chat. I thank you guys for sharing. We still have a lot more information to cover, but we definitely want to honor folks who are in the chat and get their questions in. So Elizabeth, can you go ahead and take us through this chat process?
Absolutely. I just want to thank everybody for adding your comments and questions there. I know that there have been community meetings where it's very much one way. So we're grateful that you're really adding your input. So we're going to go in order here. Just so that I don't miss anyone. I know that Kay Adams, you had a question here.
Thank you. I would just like to let it go because I think as the conversation has proceeded, I think that the participants have pretty much answered the questions that I had at the time. I do have a comment to make about these high rises though.
Well, first, Kay, let's hear your question first, just so we know what the question is, and then you can make your comment.
Okay, thank you. My questions had to do with, you've clearly identified some major concerns of this community. And I was asking if there were specific things that you could see that are needed. And you actually responded to that for the most part, understanding that we need something like a cahoots, something that's between the police and the community, whereas it doesn't all of a sudden come into the police area. It isn't really their, what can I say? It's not their area of expertise, basically. You've talked about keeping the children, having community activities for the community. You've talked about making sure that the council people come to the community, that they understand what's going on in the community. There's a big need for bilingual literature or people who come to the community that are bilingual and so on. So I think you've done a good job of answering the questions that I had. I can see these things that you've outlined would be helpful in building trust. And with the police, I mean, sadly, who trusts the police these days? So I don't know what could be done except with a cahoots type of thing that would help in that area.
Thank you, Kay. Hold up, Elizabeth. I totally omitted this. So let me just, for disclosure purposes, we have invited members of the police department, and I should have said this at the very beginning, and Flo, I apologize for that, but we have invited members of the police department to listen in. The whole point of this is to listen so they are able to hear directly from community members out of their own mouths, through their own lenses and experiences, what they see as issues. We will convene with the police department and work towards a plan of how to implement the things that are coming out of this series of community discussions that we're having. All right, Elizabeth, go ahead.
Thank you. So Neftali Del Rio asked, do y'all believe we need more help for our undocumented folks?
I will say definitely a short yes. We do. We have to remember that these are the unforgettable people that we kind of tend to ignore. They exist. And so, yes, we need to put more attention to um, this specific population.
Thank you, Julia. This could go for any of you. What are the community hubs? This is from Jessica. Um, I noticed the laundromat at Villa and Los Robles has lots of people, but no signs or information. Can businesses coordinate? Have they been contacted? Jessica, is this related to, maybe you can expand on that?
Yeah, so it was kind of tied into the conversation we're having about the like the lack of information that people in the community might have about events that are happening. I was thinking if there's a way to coordinate, you know, at places where we kind of consider community hubs, which might not be official like community centers, but where a lot of people come and are there for a while. So knows that parking lot has a big area that's kind of in the back where people maybe, you know, they're kind of waiting for their laundry to finish. So that could be a good opportunity if there's other things like that. And if those might be places that we could, you know, have different places where, you know, people can try to connect with the community, whether it's city or other organizations that offer other services. It could be a good opportunity. And I was curious if those companies have been contacted or if those owners, I don't personally know who they are. I know in COVID, it's kind of hard to make those connections, but it seems like it could be a good way to sort of have places where people in the community could just kind of better understand what's going on. So I wasn't sure if that's been explored already.
No, I think that's an awesome point that you bring up. And that's people that been doing that, right? And these community hubs, not just like spaces, but events, right? Like you go to Robinson Park when, you know, before COVID, a lot of families go there to watch baseball, to watch, you know, their kids play football, or you go to Villa Park or the Rose Bowl, you have a lot of people that play soccer, right? Me being one of them as growing up, and you see all these families. So the ideal, it would be to bring a booth, share these resources or these community events from, you know, the council or the city, but that doesn't happen. And many people have told the city in their different programs and departments, like, hey, you need to go to these spaces, go where the people are at. So they know.
Yeah. Even like just being there in the community, is there a way that we as people who are close could actually bring those resources if we coordinate or talk to someone in the community? Like, I guess that's the sort of thing I'm thinking too, because I live close, other people, we live close. So maybe if we're in this meeting, we're more aware of what's going on. So then we could bring that information and what we know to others, like right in our neighborhood, and not have to count on the city to do it first.
Yeah, and the same thing with this development at the 99-cent store, right? A lot of the community does not know because there hasn't been any information. I know the development that's happening with our city, Pasadena, with the Orange Grove and Lincoln area, right? A lot of people don't know. Last time when I went to a walking tour, there was a lot of people there, but a lot of people not from that community. So as we were walking, people that are not from the community were saying, oh, there needs to be this, there needs to be this. They didn't know what this was. And just me and a few other folks were there. Well, that's a medical center. That's a clinic. People didn't know that, right?
I was on that talk with you, yeah.
Yes, I remember. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, so, yeah, thank you, right? So a lot of people that are going to these events are people not from the community. So we're getting input from people who are not from the community, right? Our people are not being heard. And that's why it's very important. That's why there's this disconnect and no trust.
Let me ask Julieta a question, because I want to ground Villa Park. What is the significance of Villa Park to the Latino community, and what it means to folks in community? Because you've been around it well before its iteration of what it is right now.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to share a little bit of a personal side. Some time ago, I decided that I wanted to move outside of Pasadena, and actually I moved to the East Coast, to Virginia. But when my son, who is 12 years old, was born, as soon as he was born, I realized, well, what am I doing in Virginia when I have Pasadena, such a great city for a kid to grow in? I have Villa Park two blocks away. And I moved back to Pasadena just thinking of Villa Park, because that's where I grew up also. That's where I would spend my Sundays. And so when I started going to Villa Park, it was beautiful to see my kid playing around in the playground while I chit chat with my friends. It was our park where our kids will run freely without being afraid of anything, and where we could just sit quietly. That was our therapy of mothers just sitting there watching our kids play and chit chat. And after he moved that stage and he started getting involved with the programs at Villa Park, I that's where he learned how to swim. That's where he learned a little bit about art, all other programs. But what one of the things that I've noticed, it's about how expensive Villa Park got. It's incredible because I'm going to give you one example. For instance, I wanted him to join the folklorico. They used to have a folklorico. They had it for years, decades, I believe, 20 years. And all of a sudden, the folklorico moved out of the Villa Park because it got too expensive. They're charging about $40 per kid, and to some families that might mean a lot, but for a family that is getting minimum wage and that it's getting, it has 3, 4 children, it's going to add up, especially because that's only the fee that is going to be charged about every 10 weeks. So after that, we still have the expenses of, like, for instance, the girls that dance the folklorico, those beautiful dresses that they wear, they can go up to $160. The shoes are so expensive. They're growing, so they have to be changing dresses every year. So it can be so expensive. So now that place that used to be our community center, that place that we could just go and that was our place, I started seeing a lot of gentrification. I started seeing a lot of people that were not from this area that were taking over Villa Park because they were the ones that could afford paying the high fees and paying all these extras that it carries on. So what I have seen lately is I have seen that I haven't seen as much as my community as I used to before, which is part of the problem that Villa Park has, as the way I see it.
Okay, Elizabeth.
We've had a lot of great questions and comments. This is from Lisa W. Youth programs in civil service. High schools can connect kids with public service organizations. Do the Pasadena police and or fire departments have programs for middle school and high school community members? So this is getting back to the lack of knowledge, right? So who would like to answer that? I think we already touched a little bit on PALS. Would you like to expand on that, Julieta?
Well, I do believe that the programs are there, but it's just, again, the lack of communication. Like I said, I only know of these programs because of so much involvement that I spend on the city, so much involvement I spend with the community. But when we have parents that are working 2, 3 jobs, and like I said it before, are so concerned about how they're going to pay the bills tomorrow, I think that one of the last things is thinking, how can I find more resources for my teenager? Where can I go and find these resources for the teenagers? So again, it's the lack of communication.
And this could, Jose, do you think the city is actually acting on its sanctuary city resolution? If not, what will it need to do?
I don't think so, because again, there's fear within the community there, especially in the Villa Park community. They don't come out because, again, the fear of being detained, being separated from their families. And so I think a lot of people don't know this sanctuary proposal was passed a few years ago. And again, people don't know about it. They don't know that they can be protected. And then you hear things in the agreements that the law enforcement has with immigration that, again, was hidden and it was found by community organizers. And again, that speaks to the level of trust, right? You said you're going to protect us, but then we hear that you have this agreement. And then the city needs to be really proactive and out there and saying, hey, we're protecting you. Especially, we just got, this administration with Trump, which was very anti-immigration. They really need to be out there and say that, hey, we're here to protect you and your families.
Thank you, Jose. It's from Brandon. We know we don't want more high-end apartments on villas. So what does the community want to see there? Now, this was a hot topic in the chat. I know some folks posted the links of the upcoming development. There's going to be a meeting tomorrow, so I just want to put that out there. I know some of you already saw that, but any of you could answer that.
Well, like Jose said at the very beginning, the 99 cents, I have done some minimum wage outreach there at that 99 cents, and I have spoken with so many people. And it's interesting to see mothers that with the kind of job they have, they can only afford to do their grocery shopping at the 99 cents because it's either a walking distance or it's because of the prices that they have there. I see the 99 cents as part of the community. I wish it would not go away because those seniors that we have on Oakland and on Madison, they shop there, they walk to the 99 cents also. I really wish it didn't go. If it does go, I really wish that it was something, the people that move into those apartments, I really wish it would be more people from the area. That this is such a dense area that if we could make it open for people from this area to move into those apartments, it would be more than awesome. You
And
want
then
to add anything else, Jose?
okay. I wanted to just highlight again, we're asking, people are asking, and we're talking about what resources our community needs. Well, this, you're taking away a resource from the community. So again, and it speaks again to the trust, the level of how the community sees the government, how they see the council. You're taking away a resource from the community.
Thanks, Jose. So all of this, what you're talking about, what you and Julieta have mentioned, all ties to well-being. So when the community is well, when the community is whole, the person, the family, the neighborhoods, the block, right? We don't, there's a decrease in violence, right? It's not that it won't ever happen, but if people are able to care for themselves, for their families, for their friends, we're able to resolve conflict amongst ourselves. All of this is so tied together. I just want to kind of bring it. I know the topics are kind of coming up in regards to schools being closed, the developments, all of it is connected, right? And I think that's what is being discussed. So James, would you like me to keep going? We have lots of questions. You're muted.
Let's get through, some more questions. We want to make sure that we bring them into it. And then I'll jump in there a little bit more as well.
Absolutely. So so this is from Robert. If law enforcement is not trustworthy in the Villa Park area, who is trustworthy? Who can you turn to in the times that assistance is needed?
Well, I do believe in assistance. I do. I mean, nobody's saying that we don't need the police department. It's just the role that the police department has in our community. So as you were saying, Lisa, everything is tied together. And one of the things that we need is that we need to empower our community to be able to take care of itself. We don't want to give a fish to the community every single day. We want to teach them how to fish so that we don't depend on the police department to come and take care of us, to come and protect us. We need to empower the community so that we continue, is in a healthy way, continue taking care of among ourselves.
Yeah, and then something I wanted to mention with that, right? It's very alarming and mind-boggling that from the general fund, $80+ million are allocated to the police department, and zero for public health, and zero for housing. Things that we have been speaking of, like our people need help. We need housing. We need public health, right? Our healthcare, people in our community don't have healthcare, and are, especially with this pandemic, right? So to see those numbers, it tells you what the priorities of the city is, what the priority of the council is. And again, speaking, there's the trust. If people see that number, it's like, well, how are you taking care of us? All you're doing is criminalizing us, right? Because if you can just Google how many Black and brown folks are getting arrested, put into jail, right, being killed, right? So again, it shows just by looking at that number. You don't have to be pro-police or against police. If you see that number, you see where their priorities are at in the city.
Jumping right into that, if there were to be an analysis, this is from Erica, if there were to be an analysis of the financial resources invested on services for youth, seniors, etc., in the Villa Park community versus other community centers in the city, what do you think we would find? Same question for grants distributed by the city. What do you think we would find if we were to do that analysis?
I don't know if this is going to answer the question. Based on my observation, when we go back to, let's say, another example that I'm going to throw out there, P1Z, when we see how the money is distributed among all the communities, among all the schools, we tend to see that the schools that are on this side of lake are the ones that are left to last, and are the ones that are given whatever the other schools didn't get or didn't want. I feel that, for instance, Madison Elementary School is one of the forgotten schools, even though we have such a high need. We have such a high need, the poverty level in that school, and yet it's still forgotten. We are left to last, to whatever is left.
I think most people, if you're from Pasadena or know about the history of Pasadena, we know like back in the 90s, there was a high homicide rate, right? And it has lessened, right? We know that there's a lot of community organizers who built programs, who created programs, who even did truth within gangs, right? And again, students were able to go to programs, which again helped overall the safety of the community. But what happens when there's a recession, when there's budget cuts, when there's furloughs, right? That has been happening. The most vulnerable people in our community are the ones that are hit the most, and that's the Northwest Pasadena, right? With our schools, with our communities, with the resources that we need to survive, right? So, and we see that, right? And it's being more highlighted now with this pandemic.
Okay, I know I had asked this question early on, and I've received a few messages, and they, you know, some folks have kind of joined us a little bit later, so I want to make sure that we revisit this very question. I mean, we've talked about some of the issues and some of the solutions, but again, you know, the newly elected mayor is the former council member for this community that we're speaking about. He is the first Latino elected to hold the office in the city's history. Isn't that a win? I mean, I keep hearing this disconnection around communication. Like, how do we bridge that gap to where members in the community, if I'm listening to you, are able to make that connection with him and other city council members, where we get you guys are able to get the solutions, and first communication and then solutions?
I feel that it's going to help that Victor Gordo was an immigrant, and he lived as an immigrant. I'm hoping to see that, like I said at the beginning, we're not going to have the language barrier. We're going to bring the community to him, and the community is going to be able to express themselves directly with him. So now that he is a mayor and he's representing the whole city of Pasadena, not only District 5, I'm hoping that he's going to use his past, the family, how he was raised. I'm hoping that he's going to use it in a way to make more inclusive the Hispanic community, more information, more outreach, and that's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, and I think that's the hope, right? We hope that these resources are met, these needs are met, but until we see them, until we see him and see the council in the streets giving, you know, these resources, talking to the people, we can't expect more. We can only hope, right? And even as organizers, it's not motivating when we're saying these stats, we're telling this is what the people are saying. When we see the priorities, again, with no funds, general funds given to public health or to housing, which again, we for years have been saying housing is a major issue in our community, right? When there's no change within that, then how can we trust somebody? How can we trust the council in general?
So how do we solve the housing issue? Is rent control the solution, or rent caps?
For me, rent control is one of them. we've been fighting that quite a long time already.
Yeah, that's part of.
I know you've worked on that, Julieta, and through POP and other organizations. But how do our electeds legislate policy in terms of rent control or rent caps or rent freezes when, in fact, many of them are property owners themselves? Like, isn't that a conflict of interest?
I feel that is a big stone on the shoe, because I'm pretty sure that they were not owning property, maybe they will see the more human side. We have fought for this. PTU did such an awesome job in collecting signatures, and I feel that even though they didn't get to the number that they were supposed to, I feel that the message was sent very, very strongly about what the community needs. And yeah, these councilmen refuse to ignore what the community is screaming desperately for. So what are we going to do? How are we going to send the messages? How can we really get this message through? That's the question that we're still fighting with and we're still struggling with.
Okay. Jose, Civilian Police Oversight Commission that has been, was in the process of being put into action and into play. Do you see that as a solution for some of the issues that many of the members of the community have shared with you?
That's an effort that community folks did, and only because of their efforts was it passed. And only when one of our youth was murdered, Anthony McLean, did they pass this, right? Through the organization of Black Lives Matter Pasadena, Endelon, NAACP, did this pass, right? And that's very sad to hear that only when this community has been asking for some voice, some power, something for us to a process for us to be heard, that this violent thing had to happen for this to pass, right? So that speaks in itself, again, the level of trust, the level of where the priorities are of the council and the city. It is some kind of hope, but then again, there's a lot of problems with it, like who gets into that commission, who gets into that committee, right? Because it can go many ways where, yes, there's that committee created, but our voices are still not being heard, or we're not being represented in it.
Okay. Relationship between the Latino community and the African American community. Fragile, unified, where are we?
I feel that back in my time, it was a little bit fragile. There was a lot of misunderstandings, but I feel that we were moving towards a better place. I look at the youth, how they are interacting more, and I look at them as the hope that it's going to really unify. My son has two of the best friends that he has. They're African American, and I see I see the youth as something that we're changing. It's something that I feel that we also had to be educated. I'm talking as a Hispanic. We also had to be educated about the struggle the same story that we share, the same discrimination that we share. And so it also has to do also with informing people. It also has to do with educating people. And I feel that we're moving in the right path.
Okay. Elizabeth, any more? I know we have a lot of comments that keep coming. Any more that you want to bring into the discussion?
I believe we kind of talked about housing, but related to public safety is from David. How would rent control and eviction moratorium that the council has the power to pass impact public safety? So how would those solutions, or you said that would be part of it, how would that impact public safety?
I think that it's connected with healthier communities. We have to understand that right now with this pandemic, there's people that cannot afford the rent. So we're having 2, maybe sometimes 3 families living in a 1-bedroom apartment. So I'm saying that we need the rent control urgently, because what's going to end up happening, what I see end up happening is that I already hear of some of our people moving out of state because they cannot afford, not even Pasadena, they cannot even afford the state to live in. So what are we moving to? We're moving to outsiders to come in because they can afford the high rents. So we're moving into losing the culture that we have. We have all these outsiders moving in, and so I feel that it's just going to create more healthy communities if we are able to control the rents.
And I think too is we have beautiful communities that have been here for generations, right? That are now being torn apart because people have to move. And then the people that are moving in are calling the cops because, oh, this person has loud music, or this person I don't recognize is in front of my yard, right? And that's where the cops come, and then they create, again, this conflict, this violence, and people don't feel safe, right? And then the people that have been there for generations feel that they don't belong, right? The thing for all of us human, we want to feel that we belong.
Okay. Any we have more on the
I want to jump into I want Jose to answer also from his generation the question that Julieta answered about the black and brown dynamic.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a divide. There's a big divide ever, since being youth, there's a divide there. But I think, like Julieta said too, there, especially with this last year when there was this global reckoning, right? There's this black and brown solidarity work that a lot of our youth are taking up. And me as a Latino, I know, and a lot of us know that there's anti-blackness within our Latino community, and that's something that we need to work on. We as youth are talking to our elders, are doing public education or political education and popular education, where people are learning that no, like we need to take care of ourselves. For the betterment of our communities, we need to unify. We need to be together. We need to stand in solidarity. And I think there's this divide and conquer within the city, right, where resources are allocated to one group, and the other group is, what about us, right? And we need to get away from that narrative. We need to stop internalizing that narrative, right? Where someone gets something, that we need to celebrate it, and let's keep fighting for them to have it, to keep it, and so then we can all be unified and let's both have it. Not, well, what about us? What about us? No, we need to get away from that narrative and continue, this solidarity work within the Black and brown community.
And another question I want to ask is, and you kind of brought it up, is that the city can do a divide and conquer. Do you see that happening with when it comes to how the police treats neighborhoods of color?
What do you mean? Can you elaborate more?
Do you see a divide and conquer in the same instance of when it comes to neighborhoods of color?
Regarding law enforcement?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe so. And there's something I wanted to mention earlier too, when speaking to a lot of community members who have had negative interaction with the law enforcement. And this is by multiple people, that they say it is the people, the officers of color, who are the most aggressive, the most violent, the most terrorizing, right? So when we speak about representation, or we have more diversity in law enforcement, this is, again, what is happening to community. This is the feeling that they have with law enforcement within Pasadena.
Let me ask a kind of a follow-up to that. I mean, I know society tends to generalize people of color as to include all people of color. But what you're hearing is, and I want to get real specific, is this, you say officers of color, are we talking about Black officers, or are we talking about Latino officers?
Black and brown. So again, I think it's something they say, like, oh, if you put more diversity and you put more Black and brown into these communities patrolling, right, the city or the Villa Park community, that something's going to happen, or there's going to be trust, or something positive is going to happen. But what's happening, and again, this is quoting from multiple people in the community, is that no, they are the most aggressive, the most violent. They want to make a name for themselves, So that's why the more arrests they do, the more bigger name that they have. And again, this is from community folk, just youth too. This is from youth. They know that and they see that. And I know the idea of, oh, there's a quota system, right? Many people have said, oh, there's no quota system, there's no quota system. But the community, even if there was and there is not, the community still feels that there is.
Also, I want to add another interesting thing about the city. When we look at Villa Park, and we always think, oh, Hispanics go to Villa Park, and then we look at Jackie Robinson, and everybody knows, oh, African Americans go there. Why is this happening? Why isn't it? Why aren't our parks open in general? Why did the city have to separate us? Hispanics go here, African Americans go there. So we also have this fight with the system of them separating us.
Lisa, question, and I'll ask another one.
Yes, it says there's a lot of thank yous to Julieta and Jose. It says, yes, there is no power to fire police officers or control the budget of the department. The school board controls the school's budget, so why not the community? Let me offer another one too to sort of follow up to that. If we do not provide affordable housing for our essential workers, what do people expect will happen to small businesses and employment in the city?
Go ahead and repeat that question, Lisa.
If we do not provide affordable housing for our essential workers, what do people expect will happen to small businesses and employment in the city?
Well, the part of employment, what I see when I go out to businesses, I see a lot of people getting the train from LA and coming to work to Pasadena. I don't see a lot of, I see a lot of outside people coming to work to Pasadena supporting the small businesses. So what I'm afraid of is people losing their homes that already live in Pasadena, that work in Pasadena. Again, I see that. I'm afraid of that we are going to lose the culture that we have already, because people are not going to be able to afford Pasadena anymore. They're going to have to move to San Bernardino or other state, and it's going to be too expensive for them to travel to Pasadena to work. So I already see a lot of people by train coming to work from Pasadena. I hope that answered the question.
Jose, did you want to?
Okay, I got this question that just came in, and this is for either one of you, but do you feel that the police are doing anything to mitigate or instigate the friction between Latino gangs and African American gangs within the city?
I will not be able to answer that question.
Speaking to elders, right? So there's a historical part of this that also has to be said, right? Not just the now, because we can't be like, all right, we've changed, we're different, let's move on, right? So talking to many elders, many of them said when they were picked up by the police, they would get dropped off at rival gangs, right? Oh, wow. That is very dehumanizing. That's very horrible, right? Like you don't do that. And again, that's part of the trust that why a lot of our older community specifically, right? They don't trust the police is because you have stories like that. And that is translated into our youth. Our youth hear about that, right? This historical trauma that our community has, right? With these stories is how can you build trust with that, right? I don't necessarily, know like what specific things they might be doing now, but I can say that I can't say that it's not happening. Like there's no level of view or communication or where I see that it's not happening.
I want to kind of go back to, or not go back, move forward, education. And in this pandemic, I think we've been listening to a lot of times disparity of technology that has had to happen with the kids, and especially talking about the Villa Park, the Madison, the Washington schools, that area is what is really being said in the homes. Is it wonderful? Is the technology working? Is the iPads working? I mean, are they getting through? Are the kids moving forward? You know what I'm saying? Is it Nirvana or Houston? Do we have a problem?
Houston, we have a problem. But you want to go ahead, Jose?
Yeah, it's a big Houston. We have a problem. Looking at a school like Madison, which is historically, and we all know from the people that live there, that it doesn't get the resources that it gets, or that it should get and that it deserves compared to other schools in Pasadena, right? It doesn't get the funding that where students can thrive, right? It's one of the lower performing schools in the district. And again, there's many reasons for that, because again, there's no resources given to it. It's kind of forgotten. Right now, I know it's just basically one person that is trying to help families who are struggling with this technology problem that of online schooling, right? And there is a bunch of families who even till now probably don't, or I know that don't have internet. They don't have internet access, so they can't go to classes. They haven't been going to classes. And again, because there's no support.
Again, because we're moving again to the communities that are, some of the community members that are moving 2-3 families living together in one single apartment, where maybe it's going to be like 6 kids fighting over the Wi-Fi. Maybe it's going to be about the mothers trying to cook while the kids are trying to pay attention to the class, where there's not enough space for them to get separate, and they're talking over each other because there's the 5th grader, the 3rd grader, and the 12th grader all jammed up in the living room. And so how can you survive this? I mean, this is crazy times. I really feel for those mothers that are staying at home, watching the kids. Some of them are not going to work because they cannot afford to go to work because they don't have the kids where to leave them at. And so that is why I started about how this community is really, really suffering with this COVID situation. So it's just a huge, messy problem.
You don't have to answer this, but hopefully in the next 10 minutes, think about it, both of you. What are maybe a top 3 solutions for Villa Park? If in 5 years, you were sitting at the table with a big old check and say, you had a whole group of community members and said, hey, we can dream. What is some of the solutions, a top 3 solutions that you would say for Villa Park could really benefit not just a now moment, but a sustainable moment, a sustainable idea that would shift at least something back into culture and back into Villa Park. And, also acknowledging that gentrification is here. There's going to be little Chinese kids. There's going to be, little white kids. There's going to be the blending. All of that's going to happen. But with the check right now, just think about it. And Lisa can ask another question. But I want you guys, because I really want us to end on some solutions, right? But we've touched on our issues. We've touched on, what the police do and what the police shouldn't do. But where can we see that if we could sit them in a room and say, hey, police, could you try this? Maybe this might work. Maybe we have got an answer. Let's think about those. But Lisa, you go forward.
Yeah, there's some rhetorical questions and comments, but hopefully they kind of stimulate some response from Julieta and Jose, just to bounce on that. A comment, community policing is needed so police and community members learn to know each other and build trust. So it's from Stella. Someone else, Robert said, so eliminate, so it's going back to what you talked about, Jose, that many times some community members have said, oh, if we get brown and black officers in our particular neighborhoods, that will resolve the problem. This is going back, this is a comment for that. So eliminate the black and brown officers first, then move on to the rest of the police population. And then some more comments and questions as it relates to education and services and resources that I think are more for city staff, but these are still great questions that I do want to share because this will kind of help others that have joined the call. Just what's being asked, is it possible to have a place at Villa Park where students can get resources, use the Wi-Fi, and maybe some tutoring and tech support? The community center has Wi-Fi outside and there are many tables. Another said, internet access in Northwest is actually very poor, older houses with poor and expensive connectivity. Imagine if Pasadena got broadband internet as a city utility with awesome coverage in all parks and schools. Just imagine that, if you had that check, Julieta, where would you use it? Where would
Most
you
definitely.
So those are a couple comments and questions that, you know, again, they overlap, but you know, back to Florence's question of what are the solutions? How can we move forward? There's been a lot of activity that's been happening. There's a lot of violence that has happened to us and to our neighbors. And so I just want to acknowledge some things that have also said early on this call. We also are not representative of just that block. There are people that are here. Hay algunas personas que no están aquí en esta llamada, you know, because they're, you know, they're working, you know, or they may not have received this information because the flyer was not in Spanish. You know, there are things that we have to proactively think about para poder tener esas personas en las conversaciones. So I think that's a very, you know, sometimes even as organized, we make those mistakes and we just need to acknowledge that. So we also have to be proactive as far as how do we help the city in putting people first from a grassroots level, right? Because when we saw the census come out earlier, there was a lot of efforts to go knock on those doors. What does that look like for these resources that are being talked about, right? So before I go on longer.
And I definitely agree. I think, like, you know, someone mentioned like, oh, we need community policing. I think we need community building, right? Where the community knows each other, says hi to each other. And something I've been, and I've mentioned this before, a lot of people that have come up to me and said, hey, you know, I didn't know your uncle, but I knew him because he was the guy that always said hello. He's the guy that always said hi walking. So you build community just by saying hi. So that's something that we need to do within our community, is just say hi to each other, know each other, have block parties where, again, we're knowing each other and resources are being distributed around the community, and families are getting to know each other. We need community-based programs, right? Again, community are getting to know each other. Community are knowing the community organizers. They're knowing the school administrators. They're knowing city officials, right? And then for city officials, again, to go to these community hubs, right? So we can know, like, hey, and then they can listen to us, hey, this is what we want. And face to face, we can say, this is what we want, this is what we need. And then they can say face to us, all right, let's provide it. How are we gonna work towards this?
I want to add about the comment about having free Wi-Fi for the whole city. I mean, wouldn't that be not a dream, but actually something that it could be like a must? If we have free schools, why not have the free Wi-Fi? And I'm going to share something that the community has been going through when it comes to Wi-Fi. There are some mothers that they have actually asked for help to call these companies that are supposedly offering the free Wi-Fi for the students. And what they are met with is salespersons that are so eager in selling them a whole package. So you're going to ask for the free because students at home, and yet there's trying to a service. So we need, it will be something that we desperately need, free Wi-Fi for the whole city, just like we have gas, just like we have electricity. Why not have Wi-Fi? So that's my 5 cents for the PUSC to think about.
And that's a checklist right there, right? That's something tangible that the city can provide, internet access that we all need, especially with this online thing. So it's mind-boggling. Why hasn't it happened?
Okay.
Mhm.
I also,
Any more questions, Flo, or comments you want to make as we kind of get close to wrapping this up?
yes, I want to talk about, how do you feel the arts, has it dwindled or has it increased from Villa Park? You spoke about the dance there, but what other arts used to be there and what other arts should be there? And what does that mean when we say art?
Well, I think it's didn't like it decreased, right? I think like we mentioned before, whenever there's a recession, whenever there's budget cuts, whenever there's furloughs, the first things that go are arts, music, things that students want to learn about, that make them express themselves, right? They can express themselves, what they're feeling, what they're going through, right? Because these are the programs that are always the first ones to go. The teachers, the programs, always the first ones to go.
Yes, I remember Villa Park used to have a beautiful program. I actually got to go a couple of times that was teaching males how to dress correctly, how to tie how to do a knot on their tie, how to sit in a table, how to use the utensils in the table, and for girls how to act in a setting, how to dress, how to put their makeup, and this was such a beautiful program that we have a lot of single parents out there that it's either the mother or the father that is missing from that household that cannot provide that part. And we had another really good program that was the folklorico. Such an art because the city will always hire them to represent the city in many events. We no longer have the folklorico at Villa Park. The arts, we need the arts because that's the way that some of the kids express themselves, because some of these kids are coming from such a troubled home that they don't know how to express themselves. And when they can find a place where they can come together and see other kids and talk to other kids, that's so beautiful. And yet we're missing all of this. Either we're missing or we are not able to afford these programs anymore.
Yeah, and I think it's something I want to mention with that too, is something we need more murals. We need art that where the community can see, hey, this is where I belong. Oh, that's me up there. That's me in that art that represents the community. So again, like I mentioned before, something that we all want. We want that feeling of where we belong, right? This is where our students want, our youth want. They want to belong. So having art is one of those things that we can do where they can see themselves and be proud of being where they're from, being proud of being in Pasadena.
So you've had a little time. Is there is there anything you'd like to put on the table of a solution before?
Yes, well, one of the things that I heard from the mothers from the neighborhood, Jose heard this also, but I'm just going to beat him to it. They were asking for more lights. The park is too dark, especially at night. It's too dark, and it's true. It's too dark. So we need more lights. And another thing is that we need more grants. There's people that can afford the programs at Villa Park, but those people that cannot afford those programs, give them a grant because they used to be free. All these services used to be free. So go ahead and help the community that cannot afford these programs with a grant. I personally, when I was a young person, I started being a volunteer at El Centro de Acción Social, which is on Central Park. And I didn't see myself as doing a service to the community. I only saw myself as first a volunteer that was getting me away from home, from a troubled home that I didn't want to be in. And it was getting me away from the street where I didn't want to be there neither. So that was my safe spot. That's where I got my feeling of service, my feeling of being simply, it gave me dignity. Even though I was such a young age, it gave me dignity. And because that's what jobs do to you, they give you dignity. So when you put the youth to work or you put them to the service of the community, that's going to be what I see now. What you see now is what El Centro did. What you see now is what El Centro did to me. It empowered me. It gave me the even though I'm very shy and very quiet, it gave me the force to get out here in the community and be able to talk on behalf of the community. That seed was planted back in El Centro de Acción Social. And this is exactly what we need. So what I'm talking about, I'm not talking only because I hear from the community, but it's also my experience as somebody that went through the system in Pasadena without the chance of, or the knowledge of how to go to a college or how to attend a university. But I'm here serving the community because of that seed planted back then.
For me, something that, with this thing that my family went to, or went, with the shooting and the death of my uncle, I've been thinking about what causes someone to do this type of violence. What kind of anger caused someone to do this type of violence, right? And just by seeing what psychology is, right? The basic psychology is anger is rooted within pain. So what pain did this person had to be in to create this or to do this violence, right? So saying a quick little story, right? There was this one youth kicking it with his mom, right? At night, just chilling. There's gunfire, boom, 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 boom. What he does, they both do, they go down, right? Out of fear, they go down, right? A very traumatic experience, right? He sees his mom go down. Next day, he goes to school. What do you think the first thing the teacher's gonna tell him? It's not that, hey, are you okay? Hey, I heard there's a shooting at where you live. Are you okay? Is your family okay? No, it's the first thing that they're gonna tell him, or that they tell him, where's your homework? There's a test coming up. You're failing my class, right? So what that student does, and then they internalize that. And this student could be like a B student on the way to college, but because of that experience, what is the response of that student? The student is going to respond, well, F you, forget your class, forget your homework, forget your test, right? So this is something, a story that was a student basically, told me, right? And because he had mentors, I was able to speak with them. He went to programs. I was able to speak with them. Other people were able to speak with them. But imagine the students who do not have those mentors, who do not go to those programs because there are not enough programs, right? What happens? Again, everybody wants to belong, right? They feel they don't belong in school. They go home, the support's not there because their parents are working hard. They don't see them. They're working night and day. Right? There's no support with that emotion that they're going through. So where do they go? They go to the streets. That's where the streets, they feel like a belonging for many reasons, right? And that's like a common thing within our youth. And that's why there is violence within our youth, right? And I think, like as mentioned before, we need to reimagine, right? And I think it's a word that has been, placed, especially this past year, but even before, people were reimagining the world, right? And I think all of us have an idea of what utopia is, right? This perfect world where all our needs are met, right? And within that utopia, and it doesn't matter what political stance you have, there is no police or law enforcement in that utopia, right? And we're probably far away from that utopia. It's not gonna happen tomorrow. It's not gonna happen next year, maybe not in my lifetime, but I'm optimistic. But we know it's far away, but there has to be a point in time where we are looking at alternative ways instead of policing. Instead of like the first thing when there's a conflict, let's call the police. The first thing when we see that student acting up, we need to call the police. No, that's why there's violence that happens. That's why our youth are not being heard. That's why there's no trust in the community. There's no communication within the community. We need to reimagine these different ways and how we solve problems within our community.
I want to thank you guys, but I also, before James ends, is Jose, could you say the name of your uncle?
Cristino Medellin.
Can somebody else say the name of the other people? Because I want the people to say their name right. Or if you know their names as well. Jose, can you say their names?
Aaron Flores,
Vive.
and Ernesto.
and
Vive.
Ernesto. Okay? Those three names we kind of honor tonight. We kind of ground this conversation with them tonight. This is the reason that I felt very much led to do this tonight. So yeah, we can pause on that. And as a community, let's pause. It wasn't about answers, it was about coming together. It wasn't about you know, anger or blame. It was about coming together. This is the middle of a pandemic, and we all belong in Pasadena, Northwest, South, East. We belong, and all our voices should be centered and grounded. And I'm glad so many voices got heard today. So thank you, everybody. James, you have something to say?
Yeah, again, thank you all for spending the last 90 minutes with us on a Wednesday evening and sharing your comments, your questions, and participating. This is what community looks like. And as we kind of move forward, again, we're talking about reimagining things and kind of solutions. And I think Pasadena is one of the greatest cities in this country, certainly in this state and in this region. We employ some very smart people in our leadership positions. I'm not talking about our electeds, but I'm saying in our leadership position, and we compensate them very well. You know, and so as I reimagine, I'd like to see our government and leadership move in a direction more so where our leadership does not commute into town or parachute into town and then bail out of town. A lot of the things that we've heard described and discussed today can only come from when you are organically in town and you live in town, and the decisions that you make affect you and your community members equally. It's not a line item when it's your kid participate in a program, you know, and you don't have. We've heard a lot of solutions tonight about policing and you know, possible alternatives to how they respond in mental health crisis. We discussed it last week. We've talked about programs. So again, I thank you all for sharing this information. I want to thank Julieta, Jose, Elizabeth, and then Flo also for organizing tonight's meeting. I see many faces and kind of looking in on us. Thank you all for being here. Next Wednesday at the exact same time, 7 p.m., we move this conversation over and focus on Jackie Robinson Park and Community Center. Different set of panelists, different set of issues, but we're all trying to move Pasadena forward in one direction. And so collectively, we have to hold our electorate accountable. Many of you here do that well. Encourage someone else to do it. Challenge your tomorrow new city council member. They should be in the park come Friday morning. And I'm sure that someone will reach out to our mayor and let him know that some in the community feel he's just been absent. And he was absent as a council member. The good news is he can fix that going forward, should he choose to, as the mayor. So until we have another opportunity to speak with you guys, again, thank you so much for coming out. Have a great week, great weekend, and we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Thanks so much, everybody.